So go to Google, install Blender, Blender 4 and above. You're going to end up in a situation very similar to this. You're going to have a window and a cube. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to left click on the cube. I'm going to hit X. X is a shortcut for delete. We are deleting the cube. Next, we're going to add an object, just like we just had the cube. But this time we're going to come up to the top here and you see this add is a little menu up here, mesh, cylinder. I'm going to click on it, and what you're going to notice is the cylinder is now exactly where the cube had been. A couple things for housekeeping. If I want to move around in my scene, if I have a mouse wheel on the middle of your mouse, if I click that button in, it's weird, it's in the middle of your mouse, and I move my mouse around, I can pan around my object, okay? The next thing, if I hold down Shift first, then I click on that, I go panning. Panning is basically just like if I was moving my head like left and right and up and down, but I could never like rotate around it, okay? This can be really helpful to like reposition on your screen. And then the last thing is sometimes we want to go closer or farther away, so you just scroll your mouse wheel by pulling backwards or forwards. Okay, now that we know how to navigate roughly around our object, which I want you to understand is that this thing is called a primitive. It's kind of like a template. It's like a thing to start from. And all 3D modeling starts with these primitive objects, and then we make edits and changes to these 3D objects. And how we end up editing and changing those 3D objects is through 3 different components, 3 things that make up this starting object. So what we're going to do is I'm going to hit Tab, and this is going to let me start manipulating the object. It's going to change kind of the components that make it up. This would be like if I popped the hood of your car and I started moving components inside the hood around, pulling things out, putting them back in. As soon as I close the hood, the whole car is back as a car, and then I move the car around. So we have object mode. If I hit Tab, if I tab in, I can change and make modifications. So we're going to make like a little quick barrel. Classic video game asset. What we can see is that I have 3 little icons up here. A dot, a line, and a square looking thing. If I click off the scene and I click between these buttons, not much changes. Sometimes you'll see these little dots appear. Sometimes there's just lines and sometimes there's not. If I click the first little symbol or I hit the 1 key on your keyboard, I have these little black dots, and I can actually click on the black dots and they become white. The lines around them are yellow, but the white dot is what's important. That's what's selected. And these are called vertices. Vertices are the little points that connect everything together. Okay? The next one to it, if we hit 2, are the edges themselves. Again, whatever is white is actually selected. Okay, you can see if I just left click, you can select these different ones. You should just be doing this yourself, clicking on them. And the last one that looks kind of like a square is called face selection. Again, you can hit 3 on your keyboard, and I can select these different faces, the actual surfaces between the points, and we can make operation edits on them. And what you're going to notice is that, let's say I go to edge mode, and I come to the top here. I'm going to select one of them, and I'm going to hold down Alt, and then I'm going to left click. Now, what's actually happened is it's selected all the edges that go around the top, okay? Now, what I want you to notice really carefully is at the top here, there's something called vertex, edge, and face. And these are the words we've been saying. So 1, 2, and 3. They're in the same order as the buttons over next to them. Well, we're in edge selection. So if I come to edge, these are all the tools that can modify or change edges. If I'm in vertex mode, so I hit 1, and I go to this vertex menu, these are the tools that I can use to change the vertices. And if I hit 3 and come to these face menu, these are the tools that only work on faces. So just remind yourself, if I'm in edge mode, I should be using the edge tools that are in this list. If I'm in vertex mode, face mode, etc., you get it. So again, I'm in edge mode. I held down Alt. I clicked on the whole top loop here. I'm going to come to edge, and then I'm going to go to this option called Bevel Edges. As soon as I click that, I'll get this weird esoteric black line, and nothing looks like it's really happening. But eventually, when you move your mouse around, you find the sweet spot, it's going to get real goofy. You're going to see it's going to zing and zang and move all around. So this is creating an additional face between where we had that edge. And what it's doing is it's kind of putting this, what is referred to as a bevel, but it's putting this 45 degree face between the 2 surfaces that we originally selected with that edge. And this is a great way, you'll see it a lot in video games, sci-fi stuff, to put a little bit of a chamfer is also a word, similar but different, onto our thing. Once we're happy with the size, we're just going to left click. It's going to submit it. Great. I'm going to hold down the mouse wheel and rotate to the bottom. And again, I'm going to go hit 2, make sure I'm in face mode. Hold down Alt, left click on this edge, selects all the edges all the way around. It's just a shortcut, makes selection way faster. Again, I'm going to come to Edge, I'm going to go to Bevel Edge, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to kind of move my mouse around my scene until I see it actually start to manipulate. I'm just going to eyeball it. Okay. At this point now, we have a cylinder with a beveled top and a beveled bottom. What I want to do is I'm going to add some more geometry to this. We're going to add an edge loop around the middle. So if I'm hovering over my model, I'm going to hit Control R, and you're going to see this line, and it's not going to do much, and as I move around, it kind of jumps around. But if I'm hovering over the middle, I'm going to left click once, and you're going to be able to move this up and down. If we just right click, it's going to just keep it right back in the center. So that's what we're going to do. You're going to right click, and it's going to submit this cut. So now what we've done is we've actually cut our model in half. So if we go to face mode, you'll see that now there used to be one long face. There's now 2 faces here, and there's now actually edges in the center of our mesh. From here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do Alt, and we're going to left click on that. And again, we're going to go to Edge. And this time we're going to bevel just like we did. But instead of this time of it creating a 45, as you see as we move around, it's actually creating another face, but just in the middle of this. And so I'm just going to kind of pick an arbitrary value just like this. And you'll see now, again, if we go to face mode, I now have a face here, here, and here. So by doing different operations, I can add or refine my geometry on my primitive. So before I didn't have the ability to select in here because it was just one long polygon face, and now it's actually 3 faces. So now while I'm in face selection mode, I'm going to select this face right here. I'm going to hit Alt and then left click next to it, and it's going to, again, do the same thing that the edges did, but we're in face mode now. Now that we've done that, what I want to do is I want to do an operation on the faces. Okay? We had done operations on edges. We're going to do it on faces now. So I'm going to come to the face menu here, and I'm going to go to extrude faces along normals. So you might say extrude faces and then along normals. What are normals? Fancy way of saying, if I were to stick an arrow pointing off of this surface, this flat top, this side, what is straight out from it? What is, if I put an arrow and I said, what direction is that surface pointing? It'd be straight up. And out of the side, each one is at a slightly different angle, but it's pointing straight out from the center of the cylinder. So this is a really handy way to kind of push things out. So I'm going to go, because I'm in face mode, I'm going to go to face and then extrude faces along normals. And then I'm going to drag the mouse around. You're going to see it's going to get real wild. And so we want to be careful. If you're seeing artifacts or like little visual glitches, you might have actually gone too far in the one way. Just push your mouse up or down, pull it up and down on your mouse until you don't see those. And we're just going to do like a really small, subtle effect. We're just going to push it out just a little bit. And this is kind of going to act as like a band around our little barrel thing here. And so now that I have this selected, I could move it. So let's come over here to the Move tool, which is on the side of your screen here. It should be here. If not, you can hit the G key, but we're going to click this, and then we're going to get a little arrow system. The arrows point in directions. One points left and right, one points forward and backwards, and one points up and down. Okay? They have names, X, Y, and Z. They are different in different programs. Don't overthink it. They basically just stand for a direction. Am I going left or right, forward or back, up or down? So if I want to move these faces up or down, I could do that. As you can see, it looks a little odd though, because I'm not moving the whole band. I'm only moving the faces I've selected. So I want to actually end up selecting the rest. So I'm going to hold down Shift and Alt, and I'm going to click on one of these bottom faces, and again, use the right mouse button clicking in to rotate. And now that I have all these faces selected, if I move, you'll see I can move the whole loop. All of them. I'm going to mouse wheel out. And if I pull off the bottom, I get this shimmery odd. It's called non-manifold geometry. Don't worry about it right now. Anytime you see that, it's bad. It's bad. So we've pushed it beyond the silhouette. We were trying to do something where the geometry is now invalidated or doesn't really make sense in reality. But I'm just going to pull it down before it crosses that bottom threshold and just kind of leave it right there. And we're going to just do this one more time. So again, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to hit Control R. I'm going to left click one time, and then I'm going to right click one time. And it's going to drop it, and then I'm going to hit Control B to bevel. And that's going to create new geometry for me. Hit 3 to go to face mode. Hold down Alt, and then left click on the face next to that one. We're in face mode, so we're going to check the face tools, extrude faces along normals. Again, I'm just pushing my mouse up and down, and I'm just going to kind of make this band here. Once I'm submitted to that, another cool trick I can do while these are all still selected is I can hit Control and the plus key on your numpad, and that actually is what's called grows a selection. So it selects the faces next to the faces I already have selected, and now I'm just going to drag that up. And we're going to do it one last time, just to get muscle memory. Control and R, right around the middle. We're going to hit Control B. These is a shortcut for beveling, so we don't need to come up here to the edge menu and select it. And you'll actually see right here, kind of in light gray, they actually have the names of the shortcuts written into the software. So this way you don't have to come to the menu. You can actually just hold down Control and hit that. And then from here, I'll come back to face, extrude face along normal, and I'm going to just pull this out a little bit. And at this point, I'm going to hit Tab to go back to object mode, and we're just going to look at what we created. So we've got this little cylinder, we've got these little bands on it. It's looking pretty good. One thing you're going to notice about 3D modeling when you first get started is it's a little odd, right? It's like it's got these lines on it. It's a little bit tough to see. If yours doesn't look exactly like mine, what you can do is you can go up here to viewport shading, this little drop down arrow, and we're going to go to cavity, and you're going to click cavity on and then type to both. This is a fancy way of basically creating lighting on the surface without creating lights. Just helps us view the topology is what it's called, or the lines and the edges and the faces. So in video games, when we have two surfaces meet, we don't know if those should be perfectly sharp, like if you were to have two pieces of metal meet up, or if we want it to be a bit more smooth looking. And because we don't have perfectly smooth surfaces, because it would take a lot of geometry, a lot of faces to smooth it out, what we do is we can kind of fake it with some math for the surface shading. So we're going to do that. We're going to fake it with some math, and we're going to show you the results. So right now it looks very sharp, but if I right click on it and I go to Shade Auto Smooth, which is a fancy way of saying based on an angle, so if something is sharp, leave it sharp. But if it's underneath a certain angle threshold between the two faces, I want it to look like it's smoother than it is sharp. And we can kind of get this result right here. What I want to do at this point is to kind of prove a point. So we're going to export this as is. So let's just export this to Unreal. So at this point, you should go install Unreal. I would suggest download Engine 5.5, open a brand new project, either a first person or third person game project, and we'll kind of go from there. In terms of how to get this outside of Blender. So now that we have our object and we have left click to select it, what you do is you go to File, you go to Export, and then FBX. FBX is just a file type that holds the data, the information we need to represent our 3D object in another piece of software. So it's got the positions of all the faces, all the positions of all the vertices, the edges, and then that way Unreal can read that data and do something with it. So now we need to pick a location on the left-hand side here to save our asset. So like you can see, this is all your files on your computer. So I've got a desktop. I have a little quick tutorial temp folder I hold junk in. Feel free to save this wherever. Save it on your desktop if you want to, or in a folder you made on your desktop. It's really up to you. I'm just going to name this container. Container _01. Video game names, usually, it's a good practice to do an underscore number. That way, if there's a 70 variants of a container, you're sure, oh, number 1 is the variant I was thinking of. On the right-hand side are the options for when we go to export this. So as you can see, I have export options for the file. So what I like to do is there's this option here. I'm going to left click on this little fold and bring it over. Limit to selected objects. I'm going to click on this. So basically it's saying if I don't have anything selected, when I go to export, nothing will be exported. But if I left click and it's got this yellow orange line around it, it's going to be actually sent to a file. The last thing I'm going to do is come into to geometry and set the smoothing to face. This is something that Unreal appreciates. Basically, when we talked about making that auto smooth and setting all that face information up so that it looks like it's actually smoother than it is based on the amount of geometry, Unreal is expecting it in a certain format, and this makes that easier. And the last thing I like to do is just turn off animations for right now, because this object is what we'd refer to as a static mesh. It by itself does not have any moving parts. It's just supposed to be kind of like statically there. Static meaning not moving, not animating, nothing twists or deforms. So now that we've got our settings set up, we have our mesh selected, I'm going to come down here and hit Export FBX. That window will close and it will write that file, and now it's on our computer. So the next step is I'm going to see you guys inside of Unreal Engine. So again, just start a brand new project and I'll see you there. Now that I'm inside of Unreal Engine 5.5, what I'm going to do is go to File, New Level, Basic, Create. And this is just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Now that I'm right here, let's get that object into Unreal. So I'll come down to your content drawer. I'm going to right click and go to Import to Game. I'm going to navigate to my file system on the left here, to the folder in which we saved our object. And I named mine Container 01. And once I select this, I'm just going to double click it. And by default, you're going to get this very intimidating window with tons of options about settings, about how you want to import your object. We're going to leave everything the same. We're not going to change anything, and just click Import. And what you're going to notice is that it will now bring your object in down here inside of wherever folder you were inside. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to left click and drag it into my scene. Now, the first thing I want you to notice, I'm going to hold down the right key and use WASD to move around, is that my object, when it came in and I dragged it into my scene, it's halfway underground. And you might be saying, man, that's kind of annoying. I guess I'll just click and drag and pull it up. Okay. Well, you could do that. But again, when I come back to my content drawer and I drag it in, it's in the ground again. And I'd have to click and drag it up. The reason it's in the ground halfway is because of what's called its pivot point. And a pivot point is a specific piece of data that was exported with our model into Unreal that tells Unreal, hey, no, seriously, this is the point in which my whole object rotates around and sits on. That's the easiest way to say it. When I go back to Blender and we see our object, you'll notice that our object's actually sitting in the middle of the grid right now. And that's not exactly what we want. We want our object sitting up higher, and that little yellow dot that's almost impossible to see in the center of our mesh right now is our pivot point. And we want to assign that to a different location of our mesh than the very center. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the pivot point first. So I'm going to go back into edit mode, select my mesh, hit tab, hit 3 for face mode, select the bottom of my mesh. I want to pivot, I want my object to sit on the base, and I want it to pivot around the base of the object. So now that I have that selected, I'm going to hit Shift S, it's a shortcut, and I'm going to do cursor to selected. Now, this is not our mouse cursor. This is a special thing called the 3D cursor that is unique to Blender. And it is actually that little red and white symbol with some lines in it. But when I select this, you'll notice that that little red and white symbol thing actually moved and snapped to the bottom of my 3D object. Now, the orange dot is still up in the middle. So we're one step away. Now that that has been assigned to this face, which is on the bottom of my mesh, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Tab and go back to Object Mode. That's important. I'm going to right click and then set origin to 3D cursor. So what I'm basically saying is move my little orange dot, the thing I want to rotate around. The origin and the pivot point are the same thing. Just want to make sure that's clear. That's a little confusing as well. Move the orange dot, the thing I'm going to pivot and move around, to the 3D cursor. Now that object, that dot, jumped down and the data is stored right here. okay, at the bottom. Now, my object is still low and not in the center. So what I want to do is select my object. I can hit N and find item. And what you're going to see over here is the location of my object. This location is telling me basically the left, right, forward, back, up and down of that dot. And right now it's saying that the Z is 1 meter negative of the center of this. So if I come in here and click and then type in 0, my object has now went up, okay? It's now sitting on the grid, and my pivot or origin point is now perfectly in the center of that grid, and everything is lined up. And this is really crucial. This is something super important for game assets. The last thing you can check is if you ever did scale. So hit S and move your mouse. You'll see that this number now says 1.368. This is not good to import into Unreal with a scale other than 1. The reason being certain operations expect this to be 1. And you might be asking yourself, well, I like this crate bigger. What do I do? And what you do is you actually select your mesh, hit Control A, and then you need to apply your scale. So right here, I can apply my scale, and you'll see that this 1.36, so again, Control A. If I apply the scale, it goes to 1. And now our object is a little bigger when we send it to Unreal. Same being if I hit S and I scaled it down, 0.6. Again, I hit Control A while the mesh is selected, scale, and the same thing goes for rotation. So usually just rotation and scale. Select that. Everything here is zeroed. Everything else is 1. Our model is really good. So now that I have this, I'm going to come over to File. I'm going to export FBX. I'm going to go to Container, and I'm just going to double click on Container because this is the file I already exported. Double click it, and it's going to overwrite my file. I'm going to come back into Unreal. I'm going to open my content drawer, and then I'm going to right click on the asset, and at the very top, there's an option here called Reimport. So because I overwrit the file, or overwritten the file with new data, if I re-import this, the object now is sitting on the ground. And if I click and drag one out, it actually is sitting on the ground properly. And the one that I adjusted is incorrectly positioned. So one thing to always pay attention to is that you want to make sure that your origin / your pivot point is in the right spot and all your transforms are frozen before importing into Unreal. So this can be really kind of a crucial, fun little step. Just to kind of take this one step further, let's just make a quick material for this. So in Unreal, I'm just going to right click, go to material, name it M_test material 01. I'm going to open this up, and we're just going to apply, hold down the 3 key, left click. This lets you get a color. I'm going to change my color to red, kind of like an explosive barrel. And I'm going to click the white pin, which is all the colors combined, base color, hit apply. Now that we have that, I'm going to come back into my object in the content browser and double click to open it, not in the scene. And when we have an object on Unreal, the color of the object is from this material slot up here. So I have this material slot. If I click on this little drop down and I type in the name test that I just named it, I can apply this, and now what you'll notice is that my object is going to update its color to match the color of the object that we just made. And now in our scene, you can see our objects are actually that new fun color. So anyways, at this point now, you have the very basics. There's a ton more to learn about how to do this, but this is the fundamentals of just kind of getting something edited inside of Blender and into Unreal. You have now officially made your first little video game object. You should be super proud of yourself. So again, in the next video, we're going to start talking about some more refinements and better ways to approach this. But this is just like that core, how do objects work? How do components work? How do we get it into Unreal? Just that workflow that you're going to kind of grow on. That's going to allow you to kind of keep becoming more professional and more experienced. So again, if you like this, tap the like button now. Thank you. And I will see you guys in the next one. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Cheers.